All right, so get this. We're diving into a story that's, well, it's got all the makings of a Hollywood blockbuster. Polynesian Adventure, a massive lawsuit. We're talking about animator Buck Woodall and his claim against Disney, a claim for, wait for it, $10 billion. You heard that right, $10 billion. He says they stole his ideas for Moana. We've got some articles about this, and we're going to break down for you.
Yeah, what really grabs you here is that Woodall, he's not just some random guy on the internet, This is an animator, and he claims he pitched his own Polynesian-inspired screenplay, the title, Bucky. And get this, he pitched it way back in 2003.
2003, wow.
To a producer, Jenny Marchik, while he was at Mandeville Films.
Okay.
And here's where things get interesting. Mandeville Films, they had this deal with Disney, a first look deal. So Disney, they got to see any project Mandeville developed first. They had the right of first refusal.
So if Mandeville had something good, Disney could basically snatch it up.
Pretty much. And hold on to your hats because their offices were actually on Disney property. Yeah, imagine pitching your big idea right in your competitor's backyard.
Talk about a bold move. So what exactly does Woodall say Disney ripped off?
Well, his screenplay, Bucky, it features a teenager who, well, they defy their parents and head off on a, dangerous sea voyage.
Sounds a bit like Moana already.
Right. He also says both stories really lean into these elements of ancient Polynesian villages, that respect for ancestors, and even celestial navigation.
And of course, there's that demigod character.
Yeah.
The one with the giant hook and all the tattoos.
Right. Hard to miss that one.
It's pretty distinctive. But then again, Polynesian mythology has a lot of those larger-than-life figures.
For sure.
So where's the line? I mean, when does drawing inspiration from a culture become straight-up copying someone else's work?
That's the million-dollar question, maybe the $10 billion question in this case. That's at the heart of any copyright case.
Right.
And to make things even trickier, Woodall claims he sent his final Bucky draft to Marchik back in 2011.
Okay.
But guess what? She was consulting for Disney then.
Whoa, the plot thickens. Talk about bad timing, at least for Woodall.
Yeah, and there's more. This lawsuit, it's actually his second attempt.
What happened the first time?
He filed too late, so the case got tossed out.
Ouch.
But then Moana 2 came out, remember? Back in 2024.
Oh, right.
That opened a new legal window. He's saying this sequel copies even more from Bucky. He points to plot points, and they added animal sidekicks, just like in his story.
So 2 Moana movies, 2 lawsuits. This guy is persistent. But can he actually win?
Well, to win this thing, Woodall's got to prove Disney actually saw his work, right? And that Moana isn't just inspired by Polynesian culture, but that it's basically a copycat of his screenplay.
And how does he do that?
He's got to show that the similarities are so unique, so many of them, that it can't just be a coincidence, They couldn't just have come up with the same things independently.
So it's not enough to just say, hey, they both have a Polynesian setting or they both have a sea voyage. It has to be more specific than that.
Exactly. And Disney, well, they're singing a different tune. They're saying, hold up, we came up with Moana all on our own. No peeking at Bucky.
So we've got Woodall claiming theft, Disney claiming coincidence, and $10 billion hanging in the balance. It's like a classic he said, she said, but with way higher stakes. So what's Disney's side of the story? What evidence do they have to back up their claims?
Welcome back. So we left off with Woodall saying Moana is a ripoff of his Bucky, and Disney, well, they're saying not so fast. So what's their defense in all this?
Well, Disney's pushing back hard. They're claiming independent creation. Basically, they're saying they came up with Moana all on their own.
Okay, but how do they prove that?
They've released a bunch of documents about how they made the movie, early drafts, scripts, even research notes and travel journals from when the filmmakers went to Polynesia.
So they're trying to show that they did their own research, got inspired by the culture firsthand, and any similarities to Bucky are like total coincidence.
But what does Woodall have to do to convince a court that Disney actually did steal his ideas? What kind of proof does he need?
He's got a tough case to make. First, he has to show that Disney had a chance to see his work, that they had access to it.
Right, because if they never saw it, how could they steal it?
Exactly. And that's where the fact that he pitched Bucky while he was at Mandeville Films, which had those close ties to Disney, remember? And then later sent the screenplay to Marchik when she was working for Disney. That all becomes super important.
It's like he needs to build a trail that leads from his screenplay right to Disney's doorstep.
Right. But even if he can show they saw it, he still has to prove they copied it, not just got a similar idea from, being inspired by the same culture.
So how does he do that?
He has to show substantial similarity. And that means more than just a few general things in common. Like, it's not enough if both movies have a Polynesian setting or a sea voyage,
Yeah.
right? He has to prove the similarities are so specific, so unusual, that they couldn't have just happened by chance.
So give us an example. How would that work?
Imagine two paintings, both of a sunset. Okay, they might have similar colors, similar composition because they're both sunsets. But what if one has a really unique detail, like a specific bird flying across the horizon, and it's the exact same bird in both paintings? That's when you start to think, wait a minute, this might be more than just coincidence.
That makes sense. So Woodall's lawyers need to find those really specific details, those fingerprints that link the two stories.
Exactly. They have to show they're not just inspired by the same culture, but actually came from the same source, his screenplay.
Got it. But Disney's no pushover. What will their lawyers probably do to fight back?
They'll probably try to downplay the similarities. They'll say they're just things you see in a lot of stories, or that they just come from the Polynesian culture. They might even bring in experts like anthropologists, maybe even screenwriting experts.
And what would those experts say?
They'd say that the similarities are just on the surface, that any shared elements are just common ways of telling a story.
So it's kind of like a tug of war, right?
Hmm.
Woodall's trying to point out all the specific similarities, and Disney's saying, nope, those are just coincidences or generic stuff. And it's up to the judge and jury to decide who's right.
Exactly.
But stepping back for a second, how often do these copyright fights happen in Hollywood? It seems like every other day, someone's suing someone else for stealing their movie idea.
It happens more than you think, especially with all the sequels and remakes these days. It's a big business with a lot of money at stake.
I guess that makes sense. When you pour so much time and money into a movie, you want to protect your ideas. But doesn't all this suing stifle creativity? Like, are writers and filmmakers so scared of getting sued that they avoid certain themes or genres altogether?
That's a good question. It's tricky, right? You want to protect people's work, but you also don't want to create an environment where people are afraid to try new things or draw inspiration from other stories.
It's a tough balance.
Definitely. And this Moana case, with all the money involved and its focus on Polynesian culture, it really brings those issues to the forefront. It makes you think about where ideas come from, how important originality is, and all the legal battles that can happen when those lines get blurred.
It's a lot to unpack. So where do we go from here? What should our listeners be thinking about as this case plays out and they watch new movies in the future? All right, welcome back for the final part of our deep dive into this whole Moana copyright lawsuit. So we've heard both sides, Woodall claiming theft, Disney saying, nah, we came up with it on our own. We've looked at the legal arguments, but now I kind of want to zoom out a little. Like, what does this case tell us about, creativity, inspiration, and protecting your work in Hollywood?
Well, it's interesting because it's not just about these two movies, right? It's about how we tell stories, period. We've been sharing stories forever, like way back to sitting around campfires. And those stories always borrowed from each other, adapted things. So where do we draw the line? When does getting inspired by something turn into stealing? This case really makes you think about that.
Yeah, it's like there's this constant back and forth between trying to be original and at the same time being influenced by everything that's come before.
Exactly. Think about how many times you've watched a movie and thought, wait, haven't I seen this before?
Oh, all the time.
Right. There are only so many basic plots out there and character types. So what makes a story unique? It's how you put those elements together, the little details, the dialogue, how the characters grow. And that's what copyright is trying to protect, not the idea itself, but how that idea is expressed.
So it's not a problem if two movies have like a similar theme or setting. It's about whether the similarities are more specific than that. Like, do they have the same characters, same plot points, same dialogue?
Right. It's like the difference between describing a sunset and actually painting it. Anyone can say, oh, the sky's orange and pink, the sun's going down. But what makes a painting unique is the artist's style, their brushstrokes, how they arranged everything. That's their expression of the idea.
That's a good way to put it. It makes me think of those videos online that break down how so many movies are basically the same. Like how The Lion King is basically Hamlet but with lions, or how all romantic comedies follow the same formula. It makes you wonder if Hollywood's just recycling the same stories over and over.
Yeah, there's definitely some truth to that. You see the same patterns, the same types of characters all over, especially in genre films. So the challenge for filmmakers is to take those familiar things and make them new again. Surprise the audience, make it their own.
And that's what makes this case so interesting. It forces us to really think about where creativity comes from. Like, How much borrowing is okay? Where does inspiration end and plagiarism begin?
Yeah, and it's even trickier now with all these reboots and sequels. Studios are constantly looking for old ideas to rehash.
It's like a never-ending game of who copied who.
For sure. And this Moana case, with all the money at stake and its connection to Polynesian culture, it really finds a light on these issues. It makes you think about where inspiration comes from, how important it is to be original, and all the legal fights that can happen when things get murky.
So what's the takeaway for our listeners? What should they be thinking about as they watch this case unfold, or even just as they watch movies in general?
I'd say the biggest thing is to be aware, to be a more critical viewer. Pay attention to the details, the things that make a movie unique, the times when a filmmaker takes a familiar idea and does something new with it. And who knows, maybe this whole case will even inspire some new storytellers to explore Polynesian mythology and create their own original stories. Stories about adventure, family, overcoming challenges.
That's a great point. Well, I think that about wraps it up for our deep dive into this Moana lawsuit. Thanks for joining us as we explore the world of animation, copyright law, and that fuzzy line between inspiration and originality.
Yeah.
Hope you enjoyed it, and keep asking questions, keep exploring. We'll see you next time.